Hello, welcome to Time to Say Goodbye. It is July the 10th. We are back from vacation, we being me. Tyler, did you go on vacation?
I was in Montauk for a work thing, and then was in Rhode Island, so with family, so kind of.
That counts as vacations. Those are two vacation spots, coastal Rhode Island and especially Montauk.
Yeah,
Did
fair
you
enough.
see a bunch of like social media influencers out there?
No, I honestly was out all night fishing, so I kind of slept most of the day. I did hang out at this grimy fisherman's bar that was just fantastic for people watching. That was good. Like as soon as I mean, there were a bunch of characters, but as soon as I got in there, a guy came and sat down and said he wasn't drinking, but then ordered a double Jaeger, and then another guy came in and then like asked for a drink for the road because he had a long drive ahead of him. It was a fascinating
I
place.
guess that's the other side of Montauk or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Because a double Jaeger just sounds,
I
I
didn't
don't
even know you
know.
could order that, man. I've never seen that
I mean, I
before.
guess you could technically. It's just a Jaeger that is two, but I don't think I've ever heard the word double double
Right.
Jaeger before in my life.
I wanted to go to some place called the Crow's Nest for journalism reasons, which is where all the like rich people hang out in Montauk. But they don't have parking, so you can only take a taxi or Uber there. And I was like, oh fuck that. I don't care that
No,
much.
well, yeah. I mean, Montauk. I only know about it because of surfing, but apparently now it's like the New Hamptons or something like that. I don't really get
Yeah.
it. It seems to be very far away
Well,
from New
apparently it
York
all
City.
changed. What I'm told is like 15 years ago when this place called Surf Lodge opened and then had a bunch of celebrities and come and sort of touted it on social media. And before that, it was still basically a fishing
Common,
town.
the rapper.
No, well, maybe he came, but it's called Surf Lodge is the
Oh, I thought you
place.
said a bunch of celebrities like Common. I was like,
Oh,
Common
yeah, yeah. I
surfs?
mean,
Oh,
he
that's
could be
cool.
there. I don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn. He might have been.
All right. Well, yeah. We are back and we have a very obvious thing that we need to talk about, which is the debate performance and then the fallout for all of this. I think that I was trying to think about ways that we could structure this conversation because it is one of these issues in which we quite vigorously disagree, I think. And I think that the way to start it would be to just lay out some. This is just my old debate brain, which is like we should lay out some position, like we should lay out this groundwork in which we are in which we agree about certain things, and then we should go from there, I think, because I don't think that like I think the argument, which I think is quite interesting, is mostly like a sort of downstream from the actual issues, the larger issues being uh and so yeah, the first thing I would say is that I think that we agree, and tell me if I am wrong, but I think that we agree that the debate performance was a disaster.
Yeah. Total. Oh, yeah. 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 Unmitigated.
Right, that it was shocking. I was shocked watching it. Even though I did not think that the videos of his cognitive decline that were like that I guess are now called cheap fakes or something like that. Like I was like, come on, he's being led off the stage by Obama. Like it doesn't look good, right? And but still, like everyone else, shocking. I think it's not surprising to anyone that I don't think that anyone was not shocked by that. People who say, oh, it wasn't that bad, I think are crazy. But I don't even think many people say that. Even Biden doesn't say that, right? He's saying it was a bad night or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
agree. We agree on that. The second thing I think we agree upon is that this has led to a that the polling and that the way in which a lot of people in the electorate are going to respond to this is probably pretty bad too, right?
Hmm.
That the idea that Biden would just go on from this completely unscathed because the country is so polarized, probably not that true, right? There's some electoral effect, and we're starting to see it that it might have some effects downstream as well, right? Is there anything else that you think that we agree upon on this?
No, I think we agree on the basic set of facts. I think there's like a lot of what people are calling like blue anon and a lot of sort of conspiratorial thinking around like what exactly happened or the debate wasn't that bad, et cetera. And I think we both agree on like the core set of facts. And the question is to like, what is the most reasonable path toward like a victory or perhaps just like less of an unmitigated defeat. But yeah, I think we agree on all the things I think are most important to agree about, which is like the state of reality.
Okay, now here is where I think we should start this conversation because it's the question that I raised in the column that I wrote. Um, and it's one that I wanted to ask you because you've been going fucking buck wild on social media about this, right? And I would ask you, what do you think should happen? Right? Because
Mhm,
that was a thing that I couldn't figure. I read every single op-ed that was put out by the Times and by other outlets, like everybody who was calling on Biden to step down. And one thing that I noted, outside of like maybe like Ezra Klein or somebody, was that like people didn't really have an alternative set
mhm.
up. Like they didn't say what the fuck are the Democrats actually supposed to do if Joe Biden steps down. Then like what is next. So what do you think should happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has to resign. And I think he has to resign for two reasons. I think there's a political math question and there's a responsible governance question. The political math question is whether or not he can win and whether or not he's vigorous enough to run a campaign. He's been losing for a year. He's been bleeding minority voters for a year. There seems to be no hope that he can run a vigorous campaign that sounds coherent and where he can, do what he needs to do on the campaign trail. So I think for that reason, he can't be the candidate. And if he's not vigorous enough to campaign, in my view, he's not vigorous enough to be the president. I also think the obvious choice is for Kamala to step in as the candidate, which, her being an incumbent, even if just for a few months, I think would help. But there's also, we don't have to focus on this, but I think it's getting really lost in the shuffle. And there's the responsible governance piece here. I mean, my academic work, I think a lot about human extinction and nuclear war and AI and all of these problems. And, it is insane that the president of the United States cannot form coherent sentences on national television and we trust him with the nuclear briefcase. And I think there's a lot of people, when you say that, pushback you get is like, well, the idea that Biden would be making that decision is a fantasy, right? There's people around him. We don't have to worry about that. That's actually just not true. Like that's not how our nuclear command infrastructure works. He has the final say. The only way for and at the point at which there's a nuclear emergency, he has 6 minutes to make a decision, and it's his decision. And if people thought he was behaving irrationally, there's no time to 25th Amendment him, and so somebody would basically have to do treason, which is to ignore the president of the United States and the commander in chief. And I think that's insane. Like I don't think we can make a credible case that the man we saw on that debate stage, who is impaired allegedly by a cold, is capable of shepherding our country through a series of global calamities that we're currently locked in between the situation in the Middle East, Ukraine, and then whatever's going on with China. And so, people are focusing on the political math, and I think they should. But as somebody who has thought a lot about nuclear war and the history of nuclear close calls in the U.S., I'm profoundly disturbed by the idea that people are okay with this man remaining in
Okay,
office.
okay, so I'm gonna play the blue anon
Blew it
advocate
up.
here. Um, but do you trust Donald Trump to do those things?
No, but I trust, I think you have to think about what it would look like in a nuclear emergency. And there are 6 minutes roughly to make a decision.
Okay, but
And
I'm not asking that. I'm asking, do you trust Donald Trump more than you would trust like sort of, the Joe Biden that we've seen over the past 2 weeks?
in the 6 minutes of a crisis like that, probably. I mean, I think has
That's
some cognitive.
crazy.
No, I mean, I think he has
That's
some
great. Come
cognitive
on.
impairment, very obviously.
Yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
mean, Trump is like, I mean, he's like he's a sociopath,
no, he's a
like
total sociopath. I
um
completely agree that he's a sociopath.
as many
But
of our
he's
former presidents have been, by the way, but perhaps not as erratic as Donald Trump, right?
no,
Like I don't know.
sure. I mean,
Like
I
I
agree.
guess I'm just trying to figure out what the scenario is. It's like like Joe Biden wakes up, he's too sleepy, and he like falls back
And you know
asleep for
what?
five
Like,
and a half
look,
minutes or something.
no, I mean, he has to be presented with a portfolio of options that govern how big of a counterstrike we would do, for example, right? Whether we would do a limited reprisal or all the warheads in the air. Like, that's insane to think Biden is capable of being woken up out of a dead sleep and performing that duty. And look, you know what? I would walk back and say I agree with you that Trump isn't more fit for that because he is a total sociopath. But my point is, I don't think Biden can win. And there's this separate point, which is Biden is currently the president of the US. Trump is not currently the president of the US. The current president can't do the job, and he should give it to a person who can. There's one standing right behind him. And so I take the blue anon sort of like counter question, but
Right.
I think
Well,
it's,
I yeah,
you
I
know,
look, I get it. I think that you're thinking in terms of a pragmatic way, in terms of a worst case scenario and what the president should do, right? But a presidency not really defined altogether by just
no,
who is the
sure.
best at handling this one situation that has happened basically once, right? With the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, there's actually been
There's
12 nuclear close calls that are publicly available, and those aren't just related to the U.S., but sort of,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
Either way, it's it's
nonetheless,
it's it's rare, and that there's all sorts of other stuff that make it the electoral math part of it, the actual relevant part of it. I agree with you. I don't think that Joe Biden should really be the president right now. I think that there's a lot. A friend of mine pointed out that look, regardless of how you feel about what's happening in the Middle East, there is a sense that Biden has kind of been dog walked by Netanyahu, right? That
oh
he
yeah,
has
yeah,
not shown any type of like it's just humiliating. I don't care what side of this you're on, right? It's humiliating that like he says this is the red line or don't do this, and then Netanyahu just does it, and then Biden's just like, okay, I guess it's like he's dealing. It's kind of like when
totally,
I try sometimes to discipline my daughter, where I'm just like, don't do this, but I don't actually have the resolve that day to like follow through with any type
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I'm just like I'm gonna take your iPad away, and then in my head I'm just like, no, I actually have to work, and I kind of need 30 minutes of iPad time to be there. And so then, it just doesn't happen.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and that a more vigorous Biden or a vigorous president would have not done that. And that actually is a function of him perhaps being impaired at the time, right? That
Hmm.
he's maybe too tired, or maybe he wasn't really with it, and that he's really allowed himself to be, and the United States as a way to be humiliated on an international stage, which matters because there's like a whole bunch of lives at risk in that scenario, right? Like that really does matter. And that sort of wakes, I don't know. That argument definitely pulls me away from the almost like kind of like jokerified cynicism of like, well, it doesn't even matter who the president is. This is just about not having Trump, and they can just weaken at Bernie's this dude, and a bunch of advisors can kind of just run around. One thing I think that we've learned in the past week is that like Joe Biden has no actual interest in being weakened at Bernie.
No,
He is quite defiant,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he really
Dude's
does seem to
charged
believe
up.
that he should be the president and making these decisions. And that the defiance in itself, I think, is an argument in a lot of ways for what you're saying, which is that like no, he's actually not going to cede everything to some like, unknown group of
Cabal of
advisors, right?
unelected officials.
Like
Yeah,
he's not. He's going to actually try and be president, and that's a problem when he's in this state. And so yeah, I don't know. I will say, look, initially through 2 days after the debate, I wrote this piece, and it was like 5 a.m. in Hawaii. I was lying in bed. I couldn't because I had just jet lagged, and I just wrote it and I just sent it off, and it was I thought I stand by the piece. But the only reason I bring it up is because it was written and published before. I think it was published on Saturday. The debate was on Thursday,
hmm,
and then Monday through Thursday, I will say, or Monday through Friday, I expected Biden to do a ton of press and a
yep,
ton of stuff like he did in North Carolina, right? Which was like actually a pretty good moment for Biden the morning
yeah,
after the debate. But he didn't, and that I also think is kind of a problem. I do
yeah, yeah.
think that if he had just done that, basically 10 North Carolinas and whatever the Morning Joe interview he did that I know that you didn't think went that well, but I thought was like totally fine. Like he yelled some or whatever. That I think this. conversation would look a lot different right now, right?
But I have a question for you
Yeah.
though, which is that do you think because I disagree, and where I disagree is not that he can give some telepromptered speeches or whatever, or have notes as he seemed to during the Morning Joe thing where he was
Right,
not on
but I mean,
video.
come on.
But like, do you
That's like
think
the
he
media
can
being
get away with
ridiculous.
not doing impromptu, unscripted events for the rest of the campaign? That like that just seems it seems undeniable that he can't do them, and it seems like I don't see how you can run a campaign only doing scripted telepromptered events for 4 months.
I think you can because I think he pretty much did it the first time in
Touche.
2020.
Yeah.
And I think he's basically been the president doing that for the past 4 years. And yes, a lot of people noticed,
Mhm.
but the reason why the debate was so shocking was that we didn't realize how bad it was. Because in some ways, the teleprompter Biden was kind of working,
Mhm.
right? And that
The
people
State
saw,
of the
like, for
Union was
example, the
good.
State of the Union, right? And
Yep.
they're like, oh, he's fine. Even Ezra Klein, who, ends up being right about all this and is a big winner journalistically in the take competition
The
of
take
all of this.
wars.
I don't think that Ezra, I'm pretty sure Ezra would probably trade that for, not having this disaster on the
Yeah.
country. Um, that even Ezra was like walking it back a little bit after the State of the Union, right? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
no, so to answer your question, I do think yes, he can do that, and the reason why he can do that is because he's running against Donald Trump,
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And if it was any other, like if it was Nikki Haley, I'd be like, this is over, right?
Yeah.
If it
Oh, for
was
sure,
like
he'd be
anyone
cooked.
who was not Donald Trump, who has such a strong base of people who absolutely hate him, right? Who would vote for literally anything, not even anybody, anything over Donald Trump. um, then I think that I would feel a little bit differently about it. But yeah, I don't know. Like I guess I just like feel like some of the standards that have been brought up over the past couple of weeks or the past 10 days or so are a little bit strange to me. Like you brought up the fact that like there were papers rustling during the morning Joe. Who cares? Like the president is allowed to have notes,
No,
like
generally I agree, but there's the open question is so there's I mean, what I see is the question being is he demented or is he just like old? And it seems really important that we get an answer to whether he can do unscripted events after 8 p.m. Like that seems I mean, there's
wait,
been
why is that
report
important though?
because there's been reporting that he's only functional from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. His aides say that, right? That they schedule events before then, before it gets too late, because he can't be
No,
reliably
no, it's
coherent.
till 8 p.m.
No, 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 no. That's the recent thing that he has come out and said he's not going to do events
Right,
after
right.
8. There was reporting previously in Axios that his aides admitted they try to keep things from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. because that's when he's reliably coherent. There have been multiple reports that he had to miss meetings with world leaders because he had to take naps. Like this
Well,
is
I
like
believe that. I believe
yeah,
that.
like dude,
Yeah.
this like I think it really matters if he's like capable. I mean, in that debate, he talked about sister on sister rape. He answered a
No,
question
like
about
we don't have to
abortion by
litigate
talking
whether
about
you're right. The
Mexican
debate was
immigrants.
ridiculous. Like it
But
was
my
like
point is like we
huge.
need to see if he can like think after 8 p.m. in an unscripted setting in which presumably he's doing the like he's the president. Like I think I agree with you if that debate hadn't happened he could have gotten away with telepromptering it because people hate Trump. And look, I'm going to vote for Biden if Biden's the nominee. Like I'm not I'm livid
Okay,
and I'm
all
still
right.
going to
That's
just vote for him. But my
right.
point
That's what he. That was my point, though. It was
no,
just like
sure. I mean, you're right. I will.
you're a leftist. Even you're a fucking Marxist. It's not like you're like a. It's not
No,
like
no,
you're
and I
like
still will.
yeah, yeah. It's not like you're like some like down the board like centrist Democrat, like
Yeah.
like you might not have voted for Biden based on like his policies
Oh man.
in Israel or whatever, right? Like I mean
No,
that's
no,
what a
no.
lot of people on the left are doing, and yeah, you're still gonna vote for him, right? So like I guess like with all the question that you had, I think that the counter argument that has developed, and look, I don't agree with this, but I feel like I should state it, which is
Mhm,
just that all those things that you mentioned Trump would be worse at,
mhm,
right? Like Trump also, like I don't care if Trump clearly is in less of a state of cognitive decline than Biden.
mhm,
I don't think that's debatable, right? Like
mhm.
he was I mean, he was just Trump. He lied 500 times and he made some funny faces and he had some good jokes, you know?
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
basically what Trump does now. I find it actually quite despicable, but like it's good TV and he looked much more with it than Biden, right?
yeah.
But
By
you know,
contrast, like
um,
it, yeah,
even if Biden is skipping dinners with world leaders or can only really be functional between like 8 and 4, it's still probably better than Trump, right?
yeah. I mean, he did like just eat Big Macs and hang out in the Oval Office, as far as I can tell. So, I mean, yeah. But
Yeah,
I don't disagree with you though. Like we agree on that point. I just
right.
think like I refuse to believe that Kamala, or who is competent. I don't like Kamala either, but she's like basically functional. Her brain works. Like I don't what I don't understand is the case if it is true that everyone hates Trump so bad that they'll vote for a warmed over corpse. I also think it's true they would vote for Kamala or somebody else. And I think we might as well be able to credibly tell America that we have a candidate whose like brain functions and can do the office, do the job for another 4 years, you know?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think that basically what it comes down to, and where we is you are making a choice, not you, but the electorate or whoever is making a choice at this point, a hypothetical choice, because the whole choice is not actually there. Biden is going to
Mhm.
stay in this race. Like I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah. Do you
like
think he
it's,
will, by the way?
oh yeah, like Jerry Nadler this morning basically was like, "No, I didn't mean what I said about him having to like." He's basically done what Biden does as a career politician. He's gone behind the scenes and he's whipped every single person into order, right?
Mhm.
And he is basic, and that there are, I don't know what, 9 or 8 now, I guess, because two of them ended up retracting, people in the
Oh
House
god.
and one member of the Senate who have basically said that they think that he should, they haven't even said he should step down. They've basically just said that, like, he has to be a little bit more vigorous on the campaign trail, which I think is their way of saying he should probably step down
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because, but there's a, like, that's not a lot of people, you know? And I do think, look, I don't want to do a full media criticism about this because I think we in the press are in a pretty shitty spot here because
Mhm.
we should cover this, but, everyone's screaming at us that we're like enabling fascism or whatever.
Mhm.
But like, it does seem a bit odd that like there's so much attention paid to these small group of defectors.
Mhm.
And overwhelmingly, there's been more support for Biden staying in the race. AOC,
I know.
Ilhan Omar,
Bernie
Ayanna
sort of.
Presley, the CBC, right? I don't know, Jerry Nadler now, right? Like he was like, "Wow, I didn't mean it," and basically, and then everyone else is avoiding the question,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But there's been a lot of support for Biden, and that's kind of been swept under the rug in a lot of ways because I do think that it is much more interesting to have an unknown in the press, right? Like what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas, like, I think at this point, we kind of know what's going to happen is he's going to stay in and he's basically just going to hope that there's not another debate moment between now
What
and
I think is
November.
concerning though, you're right,
Right.
he's, like, jazzed up and belligerent, like, I think he's gonna do the other debate. Like, I think if he had a brain and
Oh,
it's like
he's absolutely gonna do the other debate.
dude, it's
The thing
insane,
that
like,
makes me the maddest about all of this is that, like, he shouldn't have done either of the debates. It would have been so easy for him to
yeah,
not do the debate.
1000%.
All he had to do was say, "I'm not standing on that stage with a guy who tried to overthrow the government."
100%.
Boom, done. All he's gonna do is lie the entire time. Guess what? Both those arguments are correct. You
Oh,
know?
they're right,
Yeah.
they have the benefit of being right, yeah.
He should have not done the debate on
It's,
the
like,
like,
not
I
even a
actually,
scam,
if
it's
he had said
true.
that, I would have been like, "Oh, actually, I agree with you. You shouldn't give him credibility. He did try and overthrow the government. Everything he says is a lie. What's the point of that?" Like,
Yeah,
why
yeah,
would you
yeah.
ever debate him? It makes me so mad. That's the part of it that makes me the maddest and makes me think that, I'm just like, why did they put him in that position? Why did he
100%.
do it? My sense of it, or my pure speculation, is that like he basically is in a state of delusion
Mhm.
and thought he could do it,
Yeah, yeah.
and that he's just surrounded by people who are yes men and they're like, "Oh yeah, you can do it," and now we're in this fucking mess,
Yeah.
but Yeah, actually, I lost my train of thought here.
No, no, I
Um,
think you're right. I think he
uh,
could have gotten away with it. I think that's part of what's galling is just like the dishonesty that they're like kind of hiding that he's pretty decrepit, lacquered on top of the incompetence. Like they could have just hit him away if they knew it was this bad.
the next thing I wanted to ask you was like, what do you think about these alternate plans? Right?
Mhm,
I know that. Look, I think that the two realistic plans are Biden stays in. That is what's going to happen.
mhm,
I don't know if it's a good idea or not. Right? And then the number two is Kamala.
mhm,
Um, and it would be something to the effect of what you said, which would be that Biden would either say, "I'm going to finish out this," and then Kamala, I'm like all my delegates vote for Kamala
mhm.
at the convention. Kamala, we're all throwing our weight behind Kamala, and he does his like politics thing and makes everybody support Kamala, right? I don't know how realistic that is, but what do you think about some of these other things that have been thrown around? Uh, what's it? James Carville
Mhm,
and Ezra Klein have both come out and said that they think there should be like a mini primary, for
mhm.
example, where the people come out and do a thing, like a kind of show,
Yeah,
town
yeah.
hall, a series of town halls, and the delegates get to decide, right? Like, and that the eight, like Carville was saying that there should be eight contestants, and that the eight contestants should be picked by Barack Obama and Bill, Bill Clinton.
It's kind of
um,
fun.
yeah, that's kind of like. What do you think about some of these other things that it should be open and that people like Whitmer and
Yeah, yeah.
Gavin Newsom should and Pete Buttigieg or whatever should all be involved?
So I will give a real answer, but I will say because it's the truth, which is that I'm agnostic. And the reason I'm agnostic is that I think we are drastically underpricing how much enthusiasm there will be for anybody that is not these two warmed over corpses being pushed out in front of us to choose between, you know? And so I don't mean to say that I think it's a moot point, but I do think there's something to the fact that a younger Democrat who is not Biden and who is capable of striking a foil to Trump, um, has a much better chance of winning this race. And I think people will get behind and be enthusiastic about whoever is not Biden. And so, I think Kamala, there are logistical things with the campaign money and everything else that make Kamala a little easier. But I guess I don't have. That's probably kind of how I lean. Obviously, not as a huge Kamala fan, but I don't have a ton of patience for the people who say the convention idea is insane and impossible. I think,
I That's what I say though.
yeah.
It's like
So
insane impossible.
yeah, I don't he could have very easily died. He can die at any moment. When we elected him, we knew he could die at any moment. And if he died tomorrow, we wouldn't be hearing this doom and gloom. It would either be Kamala would be anointed or there'd be some talk of like having some kind of rapid primary, right? Like if he died, we would figure this out. And so the idea that because he's
I think if he
merely
died, then Kamala would be the nominee. But
Probably,
yeah.
probably. But I don't think we've ever had a I don't think
All right.
precedent here matters. We've never had a situation in which a demented president was running against a felon. And I
I
don't
feel
know.
like it's not as unprecedented as Trump 2016, honestly,
Mm,
um, or Trump 2020. That sort of broke open the gates. I mean, it's not like he's or LBJ. I
mhm.
mean, LBJ did drop out, and people talk about like, oh, we've done this before. 1960. Who won in 1968 is the thing that I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
ask people. Look, my argument about why all this stuff is crazy fantasy is because if you look at the last week, what's happened inside the Democrat Party, that's why it's a fantasy. Like I
yeah.
think that people who continue to make this argument are not looking at the what has actually happened in the 10 days since the debate,
Mhm.
which is, basically was my point when I first wrote that piece, which was just like I don't trust Democrats to do anything. I
Yeah.
don't trust them to pick a new nominee.
You
I don't
raise
trust
an
them to
excellent
all
point.
get behind Kamala. I don't trust them to run a fucking flash primary they've never done that doesn't actually involve voters, that involves these delegates who are just like random ass people that none of us know, who
Yeah.
sometimes will go rogue and do crazy ass shit. Like the idea that you can keep all those people in line and like make some sort of consensus and that the people will accept that what the delegates said is exact, like that the delegates vote actually matters, that and that the delegates can be like above corruption, that these candidates that people don't know that much about, like Gretchen Whitmer, like name three things about Gretchen Whitmer. What is her stance on Medicare
I
for
will
all? What
say
is
I
her
like
stance
Gretchen
on?
Whitmer, but I'm confused by both people who are pushing Gretchen Whitmer and people for the reasons you mentioned, and people who are pushing Gavin Newsom. Like people are gonna fucking hate Gavin Newsom. He's
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
like
here's a
some
guy from
California
fucking San
lunatic
Francisco,
with his
yeah,
like too
who
tight
looks like
skin. Like
Patrick Bateman.
yeah,
Fucking
exactly.
like come on, like like there's a who and around here like all this stuff, right? Like there's all this stuff around. There's all this Oppo stuff that people don't know about with all these
Yeah.
people. That's all going to get sprung out, and if anybody's actually trying to win this primary, they're going to go negative, right? And so then you have all these damaged candidates that are going to be there. And we have 4 months to get it done with. Like they haven't been able to generate 10 people inside of the party who are elected officials who can definitively say that Biden should step down. Like the
Yeah.
idea that that all of this is magically going to happen in dark rooms, smoke filled rooms, and that Biden is then going to say, "Oh, guys, you got me. All this stuff that was just a bunch of malarkey." You know, I'm gonna actually step down tomorrow, right? And we're gonna set up this series of town halls. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be like the first season of American Idol, and you're gonna get to meet all these great people like my girl Gretchen Whitmer. And then this is about the time where he starts like losing the plot and
Yeah.
and starts like wandering off and talking about
Yeah.
NATO or
Or
something like that.
accidentally uses a slur from like the
Yeah,
60s. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And then this great Oriental Ted Lieu.
Exactly.
He's gonna
God.
bring some of his wisdom back from the Orient. I think you're gonna love him.
Jesus.
But they're not gonna be able to do that. Give me a
He's gonna
break,
pull
man.
out an
Come
Italian
on.
slur no one's heard since
Come on.
1927.
This is a
Yeah.
party whose last two nominees against one of the worst Republican candidates of all time were fucking Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, right? Like now they're suddenly going to get it all together and they're going to give us a great candidate that
Yeah.
everyone is excited by. Like,
I
no
know. People keep
way.
saying
No
Buttigieg
way.
too, which kills me. It's
Oh,
like
yeah. Mayor Pete.
Buttigieg train derailment guy. Like, are you kidding? It'll be a field day.
My new thing is that Gretchen Whitmer is the new Pete Buttigieg, and that like the media seems to have some sort of hard on
For Gretch,
and
as
but
they call her.
can't really like explain why, except that it kind of ticks off the boxes that they like, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
But like Gretchen Whitmer is I dare anyone who is listening to tell me five policy things that Gretchen Whitmer believes in.
The
You
only thing I
know,
know about Gretchen Whitmer is that white supremacists tried to kidnap her. That's literally the only
Yeah,
thing
that
I
was
know about her.
crazy. That was
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, those dudes were fucking wild.
Totally. Yeah,
but
yeah.
the but or Gavin Newsom. I live in the state of California, so I do know a little bit about Gavin Newsom. But like someone who doesn't live in Gavin Newsom, I bet that one thing they know about Gavin Newsom is that he looks like fucking American Psycho, and the second thing they know about Gavin Newsom is that he made everyone wear masks, but then did a fucking party at French
French
Laundry where he
Laundry.
didn't wear a mask. I mean, those are the two things I know about him. Like these are not strong candidates.
No.
And
No. Well,
so,
okay. So my question for you though is because look, uh, you may have persuaded me a little bit. I think I'm probably. I think people are underpricing the extent to which voters desperately want a different candidate, but I'm probably underpricing the extent to which the Democratic Party's completely incompetent. But why not Kamala then? Because like that requires far few moving pieces.
no, that's why I think Kamala is the other choice, and
But do you think? But you don't think?
I don't think the party would get behind her
Mhm,
because if they did, they would have by now, but
mhm,
they're not, right? They're kind of giving weird statements about it. The second reason why I don't think it's going to be Kamala is because Biden has undermined her the entire time she's been in
mhm.
office. And it actually makes me kind of feel bad for Kamala
Yeah.
because just like, look, he didn't let her do anything. And
Yep.
he's sent her to all the shittiest things,
Gave her immigration and
Yeah,
And
exactly. Be like,
AI for
here
some
you
reason, I
go.
think.
Here's immigration. She's like, what the fuck? you know?
Uh,
And he's he didn't I don't think he wanted her to be vice president. He felt
mhm.
compelled to do so, right? And he wanted a weak vice president behind him because of the questions about his health and everything like that. He didn't want the fucking backup to be fucking throwing darts all over the place, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so um there's a lot of trepidation within the party about her, and there's not much enthusiasm. The enthusiasm is from fucking irony poison leftists who turned her into a meme for about a day and a half and then forgot about it, right? Like
Yeah.
the coconut pill is over already, right? And so we can't
I
even
found
meet.
out recently that the coconut apparently is a slur in other cultures, and so yeah, that doesn't bode well
Yeah,
either.
but also, I mean, I could have told you that. I mean, coconut does not sound, but it's been like we can't even meme her for 2 days, right? So, like, what, what choice, what chance does she really have?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I also think that, the negatives around Kamala have been ignored for the past, couple of weeks here,
Mhm.
and that they're pretty significant. And people who point them out are not wrong.
Sure. Yep,
She
yep, yep, yep.
was the presumptive favorite in 2020, or one of the presumptive favorites. She couldn't even win California.
Mhm.
She never polled well in any of the polls, right? She had one moment where she did all right, where she talked about, her childhood in Berkeley, and
The
attacked
busing.
Joe Biden. Right? And so the idea that there's a person who can come out and just run this campaign, I don't know. I find it kind of hard to believe. Like, is it so? The choice then is Joe Biden at the teleprompter with fading, attacking the media, saying that they're all against him, versus Kamala, who is pretty unknown. And
Mhm.
then I'm not even going to entertain these other ideas because of the reasons that we put out. And I think that the point that I was trying to make is that that choice is pretty close. I'm not going to say it's a slam dunk. I'm not even going to say it's 55-45,
Mhm.
right? But it's close. And I
Yeah.
think that one of the things that I've been a bit, I don't know, befuddled by, I guess, is the certainty that a lot of people have that this is wrong, or
Yeah.
that, that it has to be one way. It has to be that Biden steps down. Um, I don't know. I don't feel that certainty myself.
I guess for me, it just comes down to the fact that two things. One, he's been losing. Like he's been
Right.
losing. He's losing in every battleground state. There's no realistic prospect that I can see of him getting to a place where he's not losing. Same thing with the minority vote. I mean, we've covered on the show a bunch of times, but he's bleeding minority voters. The only argument people make about that is that the polls are wrong. The only argument that people make about Biden in general for him is that, like, oh, the polls are wrong and he's actually going to be fine.
Yeah.
And that's possibly true, but that feels like a really, really flimsy and weak case. Like, we're banking on the polls being wrong. The second point is it seems like he is not all there cognitively. The forward march of time is irreversible. And I think we have, the fallacy that I see, and I'm not accusing you of making it, but I think some people are making it, is that they think the debate was the rock bottom rather than the tip of the iceberg.
Oh
And I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
it's much
Yeah.
more likely that it's the tip of the iceberg. And if that's the case, this is going to become intractable. And it's way better to just get out in front of it. Like, it seems like a huge gamble to try to hope that this old man's condition is going to be stabilized at exactly this baseline of
Yeah.
deterioration.
Right.
Um,
No, there's you will find no disagreement for me
mhm.
there.
Well, that's why I
You
think this
know,
is interesting, because I think
I
you, not to toot your horn, but I liked your article a lot because I thought it was the only honest appraisal I read of like the state of things that didn't try to be like, oh, this was just like an old guy having some slip
yeah,
ups, you know, like.
I thought, I saw my mom in Hawaii, and she did a lot of work with geriatric
Mhm,
people, and she said that, like, look, when somebody walks the way that Biden walks and kind of is in this state, that it's not, they don't really come back from it.
mhm,
And that it accelerates, and that from her sense, it seemed like he was in a pretty advanced state,
mhm,
right? And that's what a lot of people have said, and I don't think that there's any real denying
mhm,
that. He's And so the one thing that I would say that is that the big risk for the people who are saying we should white knuckle this is that there's another moment
mhm,
like that, and that risk is really big, right? Like you can say Kamala is going to be a disaster and everything else is a joke, and that we shouldn't take the risk of the unknown, which is what I argued. But the risk of white knuckling Biden is that he keeps doing this.
Mhm.
And that I think is quite serious. I mean, I don't, he can read off a teleprompter now, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes these things happen quite quickly.
Mhm.
And if you think about the State of the Union to now, and you
Yeah.
think, okay, has he gotten worse? Right,
Yeah.
and then you read some of the reports that are that basically in the last year it's gotten a lot worse. Right, that
Mhm.
people don't really
Even the last 6
recognize him
months, people
anymore.
say.
Right,
Yeah.
6 months, like he's got like people who saw him 6 months ago and then saw him recently say that they don't really know what happened to him. That he looks much worse. Um, all those are real concerns, and I think that that's where the argument for him to step down should rest, right? It
Mhm.
should just basically be like, is this going to get much? Is this going to accelerate? And what are the chances that it doesn't?
Mhm.
And because the white knuckle crowd, I think if they're being quite honest, have to basically say, like, look, all that matters is beating Donald Trump, right? And what it gives us the best chance of, in the most cynical way possible,
Mhm.
what gives us the best way of defeating Donald Trump? And this is a world where I'm not functioning as a journalist, but basically just as like somebody, some dude throwing fucking pasta at the wall and saying, like, okay, this is what I would do if I was tasked with this. Can he attack the press? Can he lie and just say like I'm fine, right? Can they do a bunch of like kind of manufactured quasi AI type of events where he's
Did
just
you
like,
read that HuffPost article that was like, they gotta AI him?
yeah, look,
So good.
I know everyone was making fun of that, but I had that thought too. you
Just
know,
fucking AI him.
I just like like I mean that when I did the thought not cross your mind when you saw that he wasn't on camera for the Joe for the morning Joe thing. My thought
100%.
was like, is this AI?
I thought immediately about how you, plugged our voices into that
Yeah, me
machine for
too.
the
That's
pod,
what I
and I was
thought.
like, I mean, God.
Yeah, that would have. Anyway, and that. Okay, and will that be okay? But that baseline kind of means that you have to believe that he can do the Morning Joe interview for 4 months and that he can give teleprompter speeches.
Yeah, yeah.
Who
No, for
fucking
sure.
knows? Maybe he
Yeah, yeah.
can't, you know? I thought that the ABC George Stephanopoulos interview did not go very well for him,
Mhm.
even though I didn't think it was. If you had taken out, I do think if you had taken that one answer where he like seemed to completely forget what he was saying in the middle of it, that it
Yeah,
would have
yeah.
been okay. But but that you can't do that. It
Yeah.
happened, you know?
But he
So,
also, I mean, but it too, the thing that concerned me was just, like, the unhinged arrogance and, like, God himself would have to tell me to leave, and
oh
no, I
yeah, well
won't
that
listen to
answer where he
anybody.
was like, I gave it my best.
It's like a T-ball coach. Like, as long as you tried.
It really is. It was. It reminded me of like what and I don't even. I hope that in later years she does not discover this. But I don't even mean it. But when my daughter like plays soccer and she like kind of has bad game or something like that,
Uh-huh.
and there are mistakes that she made, and I do say, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
what matters if you gave effort, but in my head, I'm just like, no, you made a lot of mistakes,
Yeah, 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 totally,
so I don't
100%.
even mean it,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But Biden seems to think that like the fucking like look, let's take his framing of it. This is the most important election of all time, and that
Totally.
America is falling into fascism. And then he's like, well, what matters is that I can look at Hunter
Dude,
and
so
Jill and say I give him my best.
my favorite part about all of
My,
this is, like, all the, like, relatedly, all the Democrats who are, like, maybe candidates, to replace him, that are there's, like, chatter that, like, "Oh, no, they wanna wait for 2028 for their time." It's like, "Wait, so we're not descending
yeah.
into, a fascist, the fascist camps after which there will be no elections? I thought that was the program we were all on."
I know. Project 2025, like, is it a problem or is it not? Or are you just saying, well, in 2028, I can, have better favorables and more people will know me. My name recognition will be higher and I
Exactly.
can run a full campaign instead of doing this harebrained 3 month thing. And it's just like, you just said that we weren't going to have elections anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are
Okay,
you
Jay, I have a
planning for?
question for you
Yeah.
that relates to this, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and I haven't said anything on Twitter because I think it would make people really mad, and I don't want to deal with it. But do you think? there's poll like, and I'm not like team Obama, but there are tons of polls that say Michelle Obama will win the race, and she's clearly not going to get into the race because she hates politics. But the Obama line is the same thing as all the other establishment Democrat lines, that this is about fascism and blah 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 and the end of our democracy. If they believe that, don't you think Michelle Obama has a personal responsibility as an American to run? Like, it strikes me that she's being a really bad person. Like, if you think that we're descending into a fascist hell, like, you need to fucking run. Like, what are you doing? Like, you like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think she's like, this kind of makes her a bad person in my mind. I don't know. Maybe that's like wrong. Somebody's definitely going to tell me that's sexist and probably also racist. But I think she has a responsibility and that she's like doing a bad thing.
Well, if you follow the logic of what is being presented to you, then you are correct, right?
Yeah.
Basically, anybody who is, if you say the polls are right, Joe
Hmm.
Biden is behind, Donald Trump is going to win. This is the most important election of our lifetimes. We must stop fascism. Any American should be who is asked to be conscripted to be president of the United States to stop fascism has a duty to do so, right? Michelle Obama, are you up for the call? And she's like, I'm enjoying life
Uh,
out here in Martha's
yeah,
Vineyard.
Martha's Vineyard's great. My husband's
Yeah,
away golfing. I get to sip martinis and
you are
Chardonnay.
correct about that. Now, I kind of don't buy the Michelle Obama numbers, but yeah, I thought about it this morning in terms of the James Carville's idea.
Hmm.
I put out a little joke tweet about it, and I was like, it would be hilarious. Like they do this, Obama and Clinton get together, and they like at some point somebody's like, man, nobody wants to do this. Like Gretchen Whitmer said, no, all we have right now is Julian Castro and and fucking Pete Buttigieg. This
This
sucks.
blows.
Barack, what do you think you could ask Michelle? And he just like laughs in their face.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
There's no way. There's no way that
Oh.
she's gonna run. It would be exciting if she did. I think people really like Michelle
I
Obama.
like Michelle
I like
Obama.
Michelle
I like
Obama.
her better than her husband. Yeah.
There's like literally, I mean, there's some racists, right, who don't like Michelle Obama, but
But that's kind of it. Like, everyone
right.
really likes
I think
Michelle
that she
Obama.
has extremely high favorables, as she should. She's cool,
Yeah.
and like, people who like whine about just like she was the first lady of the United States. She's not gonna be like an indie star.
Hmm.
But like pretty cool for the first lady, right? And but she's not gonna get involved. I don't think any of these people are gonna get involved. That's the other side of the thing that I don't
Hmm.
quite understand when people are like, everybody will do it. Be like, they kind of won't.
Hmm.
Gavin Newsom's not gonna like come in and say, "Yeah, I'm running for president now." I don't know why everyone thinks Whitmer, but whatever. Let's say Whitmer. Like, she's not gonna do it. The only
Yep.
person who I think would do it is Pete.
Hmm. For sure. Yeah.
And it's like, all right, do you now our choice is like, okay, so we went through this entire process where everybody basically feel. Here's the other thing I'll say. This is unrelated. I don't want to do a Biden here and change the subject in the middle of a statement, but I just did. It is kind of undemocratic to do the James Carville plan.
Hmm.
You know, it's a little. We had a primary. People
Sort of. I
voted.
mean, some states you couldn't even vote though,
Oh,
dude.
I know,
Like,
but we like there are people who voted, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
now
yeah.
suddenly votes are like no longer valid, and they have to decide what Barack Obama and fucking Bill Clinton decide are eight
Yeah.
people who are doing a little dance show for the fucking delegates, and that's how we're gonna go about it.
Totally.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
it
Wait,
is a
I'm sorry, but
subversion of
did you see the
democracy.
guest? The one, I don't think it was Carvel, but one of them had the idea. I think it was a donor that was like, and it will be moderated by like, one will be moderated by Taylor Swift, one by Oprah. It's just amazing.
Oh yeah, the donor class has been the funniest part of all of
So good. Roll
this.
out Tay Tay.
Can I say one thing, which is that I think that I think this has been horrible,
Mhm,
right? I mean, and I am quite a cynical person,
mhm.
and I laugh at a lot of things that I shouldn't laugh at, but I have been pretty. This has not been fun,
Yeah, it's a bummer, dude.
and sometimes I think about it. I'm like, man, I should really take a victory lap here for my the Democrats can't do anything take,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I'm just like, yeah, it kind of feels bad because this is
Mhm.
actually bad for everything. It's bad for my children. It's bad for me. It's
Yeah.
bad for my family. However, I will say that the ways in which this party has been exposed, the way it works in the past 10 days, has been hilarious.
It was so funny.
it's,
It's
it's been,
amazing. The Disney heiress has been the voice of reason. It's awesome.
yeah, like the amount of power these donors have and the stupidity of their ideas, and then you just imagine these politicians who are all like, like whatever, the guy people who run for office are a very specific type of person,
Yeah, yeah.
going in and then having to listen to these ideas and then entertain them. It's hilarious. It's just
So
like
funny.
these people must have the dumbest ideas all the time. They
Yeah,
must
for
have no
sure,
good
about everything.
ideas. Every idea is basically just like, well, what if we like I don't know. I'm sure that half the donors are talking about the AI option.
Oh, for
Like,
sure. 100%. Yeah, yeah,
like what
yeah.
if we just did AI? I
Maybe
don't know.
Biden can nationalize OpenAI and roll out ChatGPT 5 early so that he can have some really good image generation for his, his fall campaign.
Having a ton of money must be great. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
about
yeah.
it all the time in terms of college basketball. If I was like a really, really, really rich billionaire guy, I would absolutely destroy the University of North Carolina's basketball program, because I would give so much money. I would basically run an entire NIL fucking scam. And then I would force them to get the players that I liked, and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they would never win because all my ideas were bad.
Bad.
Yeah.
Garbage.
Like, what if you guys had 3 Korean players on the squad?
God.
Oh,
I mean,
no?
that's how some
Well,
NFL franchises run, like Atlanta and some other places where the
yeah, what
owners
if
are
what
just
if
brain
what if
dead.
you had 2 Koreans, and I'll give you $40 million.
Oh,
Um,
God.
yeah, I don't know. It would be, it just seems like how the donor class works, and then intra-Democrat stuff has been just I mean, I guess it's alarming, but man, it's basically as bad as you would think, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
they
It's
can't
so bad.
they can't agree on anything. They're almost like a dysfunctional NBA team where they just keep saying they're going to have players only meetings, but then they don't tell you what happened. in the
No,
meeting.
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They just come out looking grave and shaking their head.
What
I do
is
like the Blue Anon stuff. Like, I really like the close reading of like the audio and like all the conspiracy theories and like the stuff about CNN and the lighting. Like, I don't know, that's a good time. I like that.
Here's another question for you. When do you think the press should actually stop talking about this? Or do you think there's a point where they should stop talking about this? Because
Well,
there is like one of the arguments that has been floated out, which is I don't agree with this, but I
Mhm.
don't think that it's 100% wrong, is that like there's a point where this is going to kind of become like the Hillary Clinton email scandal.
Emails. Hmm.
And that the obsession with it is going to be out of whack with what the public actually thinks.
Hmm.
And that I do think the public will eventually move on from this if Biden is able to kind of do the morning Joe thing a lot, right? That's a big fucking if, but if he's able to do that, then the public will move on a little bit. It'll still be a huge problem. He'll still probably lose, but but I think the polls will stabilize and regress back a little bit, and Trump will remind everyone why they hate him. Trump, by the way, has not said a word, this entire time, which
Oh,
I think
because
is
he obviously
hilarious.
wants Biden to stay in the race. Yeah, like that's the Republicans are quiet. Like they're clearly hoping he stays. I
I
mean,
think
some of
they're
them are openly cheering when Biden's like, "I'm staying in the race." Like, hell yeah, Joe, you do it, buddy.
um, what is there a point where you feel like there's too much coverage of this? Like, when do you think that would be?
Um, so I think there are like a couple competing problems isn't the right word, but I'll call them problems that I sort of don't know what to do with. I mean, I think if you legitimately believe Trump is going to usher in fascism, then at a certain point, if you legitimately believe that, the focus needs to be on that rather than this old guy who's
Right.
incompetent, but not trying to drag us into a dystopian hellscape. But if you don't believe that, and I think a lot of people don't, then I think the business of journalism is truth seeking, and this is the most powerful man in the world, who is were I think it's really it's hard to argue that you can cover the president potentially being mentally incapacitated too much. I think that's a really big story. This will be a huge part of the history of the 21st century, certainly the history of his legacy. And so, I think that really matters. And I just really do have a hard time saying, well, you're covering the possible cognitive impairment of a sitting president too much. That being said, like I said, if you really do believe that fascism is right around the corner, then maybe, if he's not stepping aside, then cut it out a little bit and focus on Trump. I think that's probably responsible. I mean, at a certain point, if it's clear that he's not dropping out, I'll just keep my mouth shut like a good boy and, vote for
No, you
Biden. And
won't. Give me
yeah,
a break.
probably
Come
not.
on.
I'm
I've
really
seen your
bad at
Twitter
that.
feed over the past 2 weeks.
Dude, I'm
Um,
so mad. Fucking livid.
okay. Question number two. Is
Mhm,
there anything that Biden could do at this point? I want you to answer very honestly that
mhm.
would convince you that that he might be declining, but that the debate was the worst it's going to get, and that maybe it'll even just kind of be like it was during the Morning Joe
Mhm.
interview. I think for those who didn't hear it, he wasn't great, but he was a lot better. He was
Visibly
coherent,
alive.
he
Yeah.
was angry, he was defiant. And that's not the only time he's been like that since the debate. Obviously, we talked about the North Carolina moment. And then there's an interview he did on the tarmac with a bunch of reporters where he really seemed
Fine.
like he was during the State of the Union, right?
Mhm.
Now, this makes sense. You have good days, you have bad days, you have good moments, you have bad moments. But is there anything that he could do that would convince you that like we're not headed towards a man who can't respond in 6 minutes to a nuclear situation?
No. It- because I see that debate as fundamentally disqualifying. I mean, like let's take the Biden campaign at their word, which I absolutely do not, but let's take the campaign at their word, and he was jet lagged because he had
No, no,
traveled
no.
10
That
days.
stuff's crazy. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
but like that's the best case scenario. Like
Right.
that would be the most reassuring scenario, is that he's not demented, but he was in fact jet lagged and had a cold. Um, that's disqualifying. Like if the president of the United States is rendered incoherent by cold medicine and traveling 10 days ago, he can't do
11.
the job.
11
So,
days. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
11 days. So no. I mean, at this point, that's to me, that has illustrated a fundamental incapacity.
Okay.
And even if that's not every day, even if it's once a month, like to me, that's, and we already know it's impacting, like he missed some, we already mentioned this, but he missed some important meetings that were sort of off the record meetings with other heads of state that were really important. This is already impacting his ability to do the job. And so for me, that I've been really resistant to talking about the debate as a bad debate. It was clear to me that that was a window into a person who's cognitively deteriorating, and that even if it's not happening a lot, and even if there's mostly good days, I don't think the president can have any bad days that are that bad. And I also think if it's true that he's knocked out by a cold and a little bit of international travel, then he can't be the
There's a
candidate.
lot. To be fair, there's a lot of international travel, but it did
No,
happen
sure.
12 days before where I'm just like, all right. I mean, if you can't get over jet lag in 12, I get really bad jet lag. And it's
Uh,
like, I mean, 12 days is crazy. Also, like, even with jet lag, I'm able to answer
you
questions,
sound great. Yeah.
I'm jet lagged right now,
Yeah, I was gonna
right?
say you sound perfect.
Um,
I
uh,
understand you completely.
yeah.
Okay, one thing too, Jay. I mean, what do you make of? Because I've been obviously like melting down about this because it's driving me up a fucking wall. But a thing I keep hearing is that like, oh, it's the stutter, and I
Oh
just
yeah, I don't
find this
believe
really
that. I'm sorry.
offensive to people who stutter.
I'm a truther about that stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, we have many years of video in which Joe Biden doesn't seem to be impaired at all by his stutter.
Hmm.
Um and uh and now suddenly it's the I don't think many people are making that explanation now.
Hmm.
But in terms of the media question, when is a good time for the
Yeah. What do
media
you
to
think?
end? I don't think that the media should be run by certain dictates about like who they're helping, who they're not helping, right? Like it shouldn't be like we have to end fascism and so we have to all get on board and say that Biden's totally fine and Trump is a threat to unique threat to the republic or whatever. Um, and so that's my baseline, which is that I don't think the media should be partisan. I think I do feel that way probably more strongly than the average media person, right?
Mhm.
Like I think that there should be pro-Trump columnists at big newspapers, right? Even
Mhm.
if they sometimes a little fuzzy about the truth. It's also true of a lot of liberal commentators right now. They're pretty fuzzy about the truth, you know?
Mhm.
Maybe not in as naked of a way, but like, if that's your reason why you're keeping out 40% of the electorate from having a voice within these places, then the voices are, then the places are, I think, quite partisan. And that part of the reason why people don't trust them is because they're so nakedly partisan.
Yeah.
And so that's my baseline. In terms of what I think a corollary to that argument, though, would be that if we believe that the press has a duty to get rid of Joe Biden, to run a better candidate to stop Donald Trump because Joe Biden can't do it, right? That's
Mhm.
an argument that's been made. Then I think that there is a point where the stories are counterproductive, and I think we're past that point.
Mhm.
I don't think that people trust the media.
Mhm.
I don't think that people listen to the media. Matt Iglesias wrote a very good post about this where he basically
That
said he
was
was wrong
good. I
about
thought it was really
everything.
thoughtful. Yeah.
And one of the things that Matt said, which I thought was true, well, he said two things that I thought were very true. The first is he said, like, there's no such thing as like the Democrats.
Mhm.
Like there's no like shadow government or like smoky room that's gonna make this call. But the second thing he said was that like he didn't feel like the press coverage really mattered that much and that a bunch of center left pundits saying something in unison wasn't going to convince many people. I think that's true.
Mhm.
I don't think that it mattered all that much that every pundit in America, except for me, apparently, was saying the exact same thing. And I don't think it would have mattered if I joined in with them or if everybody had agreed with me. I think
Mhm.
that people don't really trust the media in that way, and they certainly don't listen to the media in that way.
Mhm.
Right? They might trust the reporting. They don't listen to they just use the opinion as a thing to generate a series of interpretations and arguments based on that, right? Everything starts with a screenshot of a New York Times headline and then just degenerates down from there. And so I basically think that if you feel that way, then there is a point where the press should probably stop if that's their goal, right?
Mhm.
Because they're being counterproductive. Some of the stories that have come out, like the thing where they're like, "Oh, Biden needs a photograph to tell him where how to walk to the podium."
Oh, that was
That's
ridiculous.
that's like very standard stuff. When I was a TV correspondent, I basically had to do stuff like that,
Also,
where
who cares if he
they're
does?
like
Like,
stand on that
yeah.
spot, look here. And some of it, if it was taken out of context, would make me look like I was an invalid, But
Yeah, yeah.
um, and then you hear from a lot of political operatives during that period of time. That's just called like advanced planning, right? And
Mm.
that's totally standard, right? And that everybody does this. And so when you have stuff like that that goes super viral, and then most of the public is, some portion of the public is scandalized by this, but the other portion of it is like, why is Axios lying about this? Then that's when feelings harden,
Yep.
right? That's when you start to think everything is a lie. And so I think there's probably a lot of that going on right now in terms of the Democratic electorate, where they're seeing some of these stories come out and they're like, wait, is this actually a big deal? And why is the press conspiring against Joe Biden? And then people start going crazy about it. And that's where you get the blue anon thing out of, right? And then that way I kind of understand it. It's just like the media is a group of individuals and group of outlets, not they're not all standardized, and some of them do publish bullshit. And when it's thought of as this all powerful thing, then the bullshit ends up being representative of all of it. And then people don't trust it at all. So I would say that.
Well, I have a follow-up question about that in general, or the media piece, which is that, how do you like, do you feel part of the problem seems to be that the media is overcorrecting for the fact that they did not talk about, like, they
Yeah,
didn't do enough actual reporting on
right.
Biden's age. Um, like, how do you think that happens? Like, it just seems so remarkable to me that, like, it took until now for this all to come out? Like, how is it not a bigger question and story when he turned down the Super Bowl, which was a huge
Well, what do you
opportunity
think?
for
What's
him?
your theory about that?
I really just think people don't want to get yelled at. That's kind of my theory. I don't. I mean, you are much more steeped in this world than I am, and for much longer. But I kind of just assume people don't want to get yelled at. For not being a team player, basically. I mean, we've seen the meltdown that's happening right now about, when the media reports on Biden's age. So, I mean, that's kind of my guess. I also think part of it is that, like, I think I'm pretty cynical like you. Actually, I think I'm very cynical. But even I didn't think it was this bad. And I kind of believed the cheap fake line that, like, okay, like these videos of him wandering off to talk to a random parachuter are not great, but they're clearly selectively edited. They're coming from
Yeah.
not always like sources on my team, And so I think it seems to me, my guess, it's a combination of like not wanting to get yelled at, coupled with kind of taking on good faith that you know that the campaign and the like people around Biden aren't actually weekend at Bernie'sing him. So I mean, I don't know. What do you think it is?
Uh,
And do you agree? I guess that like they really did not do the like journalisming here that
yeah,
they
it's a
should. They
failure for sure. I mean,
Mhm.
it shouldn't just. Ezra was not the only person who said this, but the response that he got, and then the circling of the wagons of the cheap fake stuff by MSNBC and sort of liberal punditry. It's embarrassing, right?
Mhm.
And I think that part of it is the man. We really got caught with our pants down here. And so we have to overcorrect a little bit. I think that some people feel that way, but I don't
Mhm.
think that that's why everybody is, I don't think that's why like Jonathan Chait, for example, is coming
No.
out and like, I don't think people are that, uh, I don't think people are that like A to B. Oh no, I have to correct for this thing.
Mhm.
So, therefore
Chait
now
has
I'm going to
been
do the
has
other
been pretty
thing.
good.
Right. Um, I think that basically it was hard to tell for a long period of time. It was ramping up, and then I think the State of the Union put a lot of things to rest. But I do think that what has happened is that I do think this is a recent phenomenon in a lot of ways. Like I think Biden has been
Mhm.
old for a long time, obviously, but I believe the stories that say that a lot of this has happened in the last 6 months,
God
to
Wars.
a
Yeah.
year, and that I think that perhaps that is why he's been hidden.
Mhm.
And look, man, you can ask the president for an interview all you want; they don't have to give it to you.
Mhm.
you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
know, like they don't have to do it. And you can follow him around the White House and you can say, oh man, he's walking a little bit strange or he seems to be wandering off if you're one of the White House press reporters. But can you really report that? Can you be like, oh man, I don't know. I thought he was walking a little bit weird. You can't
Yeah.
report that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Responsibly. Um, and so I think that I am a little more sympathetic. I'm generally pretty sympathetic to my colleagues in terms of like the work that they do. And so maybe I am too in the tank for journalism, but I don't think that there's some big conspiracy here where
Oh, I
everybody
don't
knew.
either. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I think people are legitimately shocked and I think in their shock, they realized this is another thing that Matt pointed out. I don't want to praise Matt Iglesias too much, but I do like, I
It
think
was a good it was
I'm
a
more
good
patient of Matt than most,
Me too.
even though
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
gotten very mad at him in the past. But one of the things he said was basically just like it basically changes your worldview when you see it, right?
Oh, yeah,
Then,
he had
yeah,
that
then
nice rapid
everything
shot to it.
turns
Yeah.
into something else. I said
Mhm.
that too in my piece. It's just like it sort of confirms all the consent of every clip that you saw. It confirms what other people are saying about it, right? And you
Mhm.
can't deny it anymore. Um, so that's what I think. I think that's why there wasn't much reporting about it because it would have been hard to speculate based on tiny moments, and then it also would have been. I do think it's kind of recent, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, another thing, I forget what her name is, the Nunzi woman who wrote
Olivia
that new.
Nosy, yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. And not to defend her one way or the other, but people like she talks about hearing rumblings of this since January, and like all of these kind of conservative people are like,
right.
well, why didn't you report it back in January? But it was clear that like a lot of those people wouldn't talk and wouldn't, like I mean, you can't make people talk and you can't string together, like you said, oh, he was looking a little bit weird. And it seems like, suddenly now more people are willing to talk. There's more chatter about it. And, you can do reporting. But I don't know. I agree
Yeah,
with you.
that reporting's over now, though. I think people are going to fall in line,
Hmm.
and I think there's going to be some defectors, and the defectors are going to sell books, and they're going to give us a horror show of what's been happening. That's going
Hmm.
to be wildly entertaining to watch, kind of like the book about the Hillary campaign that was, like about Robbie Mook and everything like that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
wildly entertaining to read. But I don't know. I think that from going on, we're just kind of stuck with Biden here. And I think that a lot of the press is going to basically fall in line too. And I
Hmm.
think the media coverage is going to change.
Hmm.
And I think that's for two reasons. I think, first of all, I think people are going to sense people's exhaustion with the story. But secondly, I do think a lot of reporters, and I don't fault them for this, do think that Trump is a unique threat to the country. And when faced with option A and option B, and option C is no longer an option, then they're going to shade back towards, the type of liberal journalism that we've come to expect.
Yeah.
And that there's not only so many times when you can say he must resign, and the person's just like, no, I don't, I really don't have to. And then you're like, he must resign, and he's like, no, I honestly don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, fuck you.
Yeah.
Everyone hates you. And you're like,
Yeah.
that may be true. Everyone does hate me, but you must step down. And he's like, no, sorry. Like, how many times can you really do that?
Yeah.
So I think that it's all going to shift a little bit in the coming weeks. And I don't know if that's good or bad. It makes me kind of depressed, honestly, because
Yeah. Ditto.
I have a friend who, uh, and we talk about, better things are not possible.
Print
Things
that
don't
off and
happen,
yeah.
right? Everything
Biden
just kind of
2024, better things are not possible.
slowly degrades, right,
Yeah.
along like this unstoppable track
It's
of
greased skid.
entropy. And yeah, it seems like that's where we are now. It's just crazy that like the entropy is actually like the president's body and mind.
Yeah.
It's like,
God.
what a metaphor.
Guess just
Anyway,
enjoy it. I don't know.
last thing,
Yeah.
last question I wanted to ask you. Is there like what, let's say everything is possible. Let's say that, none of the logistical problems matter or whatever. Do you who like what do you think the most democratic way to do this would have been, or the best way to do this would be?
Well, I mean, with a time machine, Biden promised that he would only be a one-term president, so he should
Mhm.
have had a primary. But setting that aside as an option, I think the most democratic way is probably for it to be Kamala, because people voted for Kamala on this ticket, and they voted for her for precisely this eventuality if Biden couldn't do his job because of death or for some other reason. So I think that is the Democratic option. As somebody on the left, that's an option I'm also fine with for the simple reason that I view this election as a placeholder election. Like we don't have a successor to Bernie. We clearly need one. There's really promising, left wing victories that are happening in Europe and elsewhere, and I think we need, for me, this election is about just like buying 4 years of space in which to, try to regroup in some way from the Bernie movement. And so I don't think there's any viable left wing, Democratic Socialist candidate right now that is, Bernie's clearly too old. I think Bernie's cognitively all there, and I think he could absolutely do the job. But I don't think you can replace Biden
Yeah,
with
Bernie's fine.
Bernie.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Just for like the age narrative thing, like what you're replacing this one old white guy with another old white guy. I don't think that works. And so for me, this is just about like how do we get somebody who's a Democrat in office. And hopefully reconstitute what's left of that Bernie Sanders moment into something different. And so Kamala is like fine,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I don't the left is I agree with you that the left is in quite a bit of disarray at this point in terms of trying to figure out who that person is going to be. Um I I think that I think it has to be Kamala too, for all, and that it can't, that for moral and procedural and democratic reasons. And um, I don't have a lot of optimism about Kamala, but
Mhm.
she seems to be pretty pro labor, and I don't think she's going to deviate too much from the Biden economic plan. Um,
Which was fine.
I
Yeah.
think that you know, one of the things that she can do is she can stand there and she can say bad things about Donald Trump.
Mhm.
Uh, and I don't, ultimately, I don't know. I guess I just kind of think in the end, it sort of doesn't matter what the actual choice is. And I think that's where, if I'm being fair to my critics or the people that I'm criticizing, I would say that maybe the lack of an option that or an alternative that they present is because it ultimately doesn't really matter what the alternative is.
Mhm.
And but I would say to that, look, some alternatives are better than others.
Mhm.
Some of them are doomed to factionalism and disaster, and some of them can actually maybe happen, right? But I don't know. It's the left. I don't know. I don't have much hope for the left either. Honestly, at this point, were you surprised by how quickly AOC and Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley and members of the squad sort of said they were with Joe?
Yeah, I'm just surprised they didn't stay quiet. Like, the
Yeah.
4D chess thing people point out is that, like, oh, they're just like trying to let this not become like a center versus left issue and let the moderates take the lead. But if that was the case, they could just stay quiet, not say anything. I think in Bernie's case, one way to interpret his, like, we got to ride with Joe kind of thing, is that it gives him, if there was an open convention, so if he wanted to be in the mix, like an opportunity not to be accused of, he was trying to stab Biden in the back. But I don't understand what they're doing. I find it. I'm like an AOC defender often. I voted for AOC in Queens when I lived in Astoria when she won her first election, which I'm very proud of. I think
I'm
she's
a
a
big
great
AOC
candidate.
defender too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Mm.
she's great, and I think that, like, people who criticize her often have totally unrealistic expectations about, like, what somebody elected to office can and is supposed to do. But this one I found pretty disappointing, to be honest, just because it felt really unnecessary. Yeah, and particularly after how hard her and the rest of the squad came after, rightly so, Biden for, Israel Palestine stuff. I just, like, you could have just not said anything.
Yeah, my theory on that is that they didn't want to. I think people are right to say that they didn't want to polarize the party at this point. And but you're right; they could have just said nothing. Ilhan Omar was the most shocking of them because she put out an ad that started with Joe Biden speaking, and I guess that's going to be most of her ad buy is going to be this Joe Biden ad. And
Wow.
so she's really sort of put Biden at the forefront of her campaign. um, I think that the reasons for that are probably because they realize that their real enemies in the party aren't Joe Biden or
Mhm,
Kamala, that their real enemies in the party are maybe some of these people calling for Biden to step down.
mhm.
And that but I don't think that they believe that they have an influence on this process because they probably don't.
Yeah.
you know. Okay, real last question and then we'll go. This was the one that I was trying to remember, but I'm having like a jet lag senior moment. But then I
Just don't take
remembered
any
what I
cough
wanted to
medicine, dude.
ask. Yeah, exactly. I pointed out before we started the show, I am the same color as Joe Biden right now because of my intense tan. Um, the the do you have wait? I kind of think Trump's going to win,
Mhm,
and so my thought is basically just like, all right, is this going to be a situation like Brazil, for example, where we have a horrific right wing guy, and then the left wing guy has or gal has more leeway in 2028, right?
mhm,
That there is a sort of seesaw type of thing where 8 years of Trump is probably going to convince people that the left is okay,
mhm,
and that running on anything to the center, especially if the center loses in this election and loses to Trump twice,
mhm.
right? Which is like something that it drives me fucking crazy. Where people are like, you're just like, they lost to Trump
Mhm.
Hillary lost to Trump. Literally anyone would have beaten Trump except for Hillary. And then now we have like fucking Joe Biden, right? In this disaster. Like maybe the center is not good at message control. Maybe they're not good at picking candidates. Maybe they are a bunch of capricious, weird narcissists. The same
Mhm.
things that they accuse the left of being. Maybe they're worse at it, because they actually have the power within the party that the left doesn't have. But I don't know. Do you buy that scenario at all? That like maybe this in the end is good for the left?
Yeah, it's like kind of an accelerationist case. I mean, I don't think Trump is going to put everybody in camps. And I think the 2025 stuff is bad, but I also think, I mean, as other people have pointed out, the Heritage Foundation has been putting out insane shit for 30 years. And this
Yeah,
is like
yeah, yeah.
really not that different than their usual bout of insane shit they put out. And so I think it's possible that this is good. I think it will absolutely destroy the Democratic Party if Trump wins, particularly if they run with Biden. And I absolutely think it will probably destroy, to your point, or extremely discredit is the way to put it, the centrist faction of the Democratic Party, which I think is good. I think people are realizing that, you know, the centrists have been really good at painting themselves as the adults in the room. And I think we are all watching them act totally irrationally and riding this horse to the glue factory while it's in the middle of losing an election. And I think there's going to be a lot of anger about that. But I also think I think it's going to be harder for the average normie to be like, well, I like some of this free college for all talk, but the moderates are the adults in the room. Like, I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
going to be a
yeah.
lot harder to believe. And I think that's good for the left. I think, the price of a Trump presidency is a very high price for that. And I think, honestly, my view is that the Democrats have already been so thoroughly discredited and laid bare by the last 10 days that something in the party is already really broken. And that hopefully we can, ideally in my world, have Kamala on the ticket, get through this election, but if not, have Biden, I guess, and get through this election, and then use this clear crisis of legitimacy that we're in the middle of to like reconstitute the left. But I do think the silver lining here is that it's going to become impossible to take the centrists seriously as like the technocratic governance class.
Yeah, yeah. I asked because like I had a interaction with Jeet here on,
Mhm.
and he was like, "Well, this is going to destroy the Democratic Party, and the important thing is to rebuild it after this in a way that's responsible and good,
Mhm.
right, and in line with the sort of things that a lot of progressive and liberals think, which is stuff like free college, free launch,
Healthcare.
school lunch, stuff like that, right? Childcare, just supporting people, not being fucking racist, right? Like there's things that people legitimately
Generally
believe.
not
They really
evil.
do believe that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and so, but I don't know. Then I expressed a lot of cynicism at the time. I was like, I don't know, it should have happened after Hillary. But I thought about it past couple of days, and it's like, well, party did move left after Hillary, right?
Mhm.
Biden
Mine's
did
to the
move to
left of
the
Hillary
left.
for sure.
We have people like AOC and Cory Bush and Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar in Congress. They might get savaged and not taken seriously by the press, and they might have all sorts of horrific racist shit said about them. They're still in fucking Congress,
Mhm.
like these are major figures in America, and so I do think that probably it will eventually move the party even more to the left, and then we might have like a wildly unstable country after that.
Yeah, yeah.
But um, I agree with you. The price of the Trump presidency is too high for that type of like almost like that is like a fantasy in a lot of ways that might come true, but it's also just like the cost is always going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like and the idea that the Trump presidency won't be that bad is hard for me to take that seriously, because
Mhm.
even though I agree with you that I don't think that we're going to have like a redux of Germany, Weimar Republic, whatever. I don't know, like shit like fucking Roe's gone now.
Yep.
So and then they did try and overthrow the government.
There was that.
There was also that. So it's kind of hard to take
Details.
that seriously that cost is. I know I'm being a bad leftist here, but it's really hard for me to decide that even if you told me there's a
Totally.
certainty that Democrat Party or whatever party of the left is going to move more to the left because of, and all we have to do is 4 years of Trump, I don't think I would make that trade.
No,
I
no.
would never make that trade.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
It's so
agree.
bad. Trump really is bad. That's
He's
the
yeah, so bad. I mean, that's why I think the like all the camp panic is like ridiculous. Like he's already bad enough. Like we don't have to indulge these like bizarre historical revisionist theories of like yeah, we can just he's really really bad, you know. And I actually think when you make this hyperbolic case, one of the dangers I see at this moment with all the 2025 stuff is they're making people terrified that we are literally descending into Nazi Germany. We are almost certainly not, but it's going to be really bad. And yet, because it's better than the expectation of it being like descending into a dystopian
yeah.
hell,
Yep.
it's going to get normalized in a certain way where people will like see it was actually like a normal presidency. And it's like, no, it actually wasn't. It just wasn't like in line with these science fictional predictions of like the MSNBC crowd, you know?
Anything else you want to talk about, Tyler?
No, man. I think that was it. You know, like I said, I think we just need to be able to have like honest conversations about this and then move on. You know, as in,
Agreed.
and I don't mean you and I mean just like the country. I think we just need to have like a reality based conversation, and then if it's Biden, I guess you know that's what it's going to be. I agree with you at a certain point that the discourse just becomes toxic, and the incessant media coverage descends from like truth seeking into like you know petty score settling, and you know so
Right. Or like weird shit that feels desperate, right?
yeah
Like, let's
yeah
just
yeah.
not do the weird shit. The
Hmm.
evidence that he's in cognitive decline is fucking all over the place.
Hmm.
We don't have to dig up like a fucking, you know,
Uh,
photo of a podium and say, "Oh my god, you see? It's all over." And it's like, "No, what about the time when he couldn't finish a sentence on national TV, you
oh
know?
man.
Isn't that enough? Now we're talking about fucking podium photos?"
Yeah, yeah, or he had like a list of, you know, that did you see all the people taking the close-up photos of him holding some list with like reminders of things he's supposed to say? Like
Oh,
that's called
yeah.
a fucking note card.
That's
Like he's
called a
allowed to
note.
have note cards.
All right, well, thank you for listening to the show. If you'd like to support us, $5 a month, goodbye.substack.com. If you want to contact us, it is time to say goodbye pod@gmail.com. Until next week, Tyler, I'll talk to you then.
See you, man.